Good morning. What's going on? Right, we have got a little bit of movement on a couple of the deals. Tchouaméni's name keeps coming up. Mateus Fernandes' name's not going to be going away anytime soon. But there's some really interesting stuff going on this morning in our midfield targets. And it seems like two of them at least are making preferences quite clear. Both want Manchester United. So let's be honest a little bit about what this means, because I don't think the answer can be sign both. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the money to sign both. So this is going to become a very, very serious decision that I don't think United need to rush. Obviously, they're involved in the World Cup anyway, so there is no need for this one. But Andy Mitten's dropped a couple of very important updates. Firstly, on Tchouaméni, that was at the Athletic. He said, basically, he said he is happy with his Real Madrid situation, but if the situation changes, the player's preference if he leaves Madrid is United. So that's not nothing. And I think that ties beautifully into the other Tchouaméni piece, which came out earlier in the week, which says internal sources confirm that Barada and Wilcox had a meeting with his agent before the Valverde incident happened in May. So contact has already happened. The relationship has already been built. Mitten reporting this, that is the player saying yes. Now, I don't think that's nothing. I think there's a bit of strategic stuff going on here. I think that Tchouaméni is not coming out and going, get me out of Real Madrid. I think he almost has to come, oh, no, I'm happy at Real Madrid, but if I was going to leave, United's the place. Now, think about that. You don't expect that to happen unless there's a seed been planted somewhere. If the door at Madrid is even slightly open, I think that's where it puts it. So the player putting his preference out publicly via a very, very credible source, I think changes the calculus a little bit. It is an if, and it requires Madrid to say, actually, you need to move, or we need to sell you because we've committed to spending 150 million euros on somebody. And at the same time as that's kind of developing, you've got Mateus Fernandes. Now, I mentioned this yesterday when we was talking about Mateus Fernandes. It's not as panic-inducing as it appears at first glance. So I mentioned it with Joe yesterday, that if Spurs bid higher than us, doesn't necessarily mean that the player's going to Spurs. The player has to want to go to Spurs before that's going to be a thing. So, same story, different player, slightly different situation. Mateus Fernandes would prefer United. Now, he would play for Spurs, is what Andy Mitten has said, but he would prefer to play for Manchester United. Now, there's also some other stuff. It was the Mail that reported that Spurs were interested in him and prepared to pay the 85 million. Fernandes making it clear behind the scenes that his preference remains United. Now, there was also a report, I can't remember where it came from now off the top of my head, which said that Spurs might be cooling because of this and focusing on getting Tonali over the line first rather than dealing with a player who might have had his head turned by somebody else. Now, I like that because it might mean that they leave him alone, and if they publicly declare that they're no longer interested, then the prices might come down a little bit, or at least we're not going to be pressured into paying 85 million the same way. If United have been holding at 60, we might go to 65, 67, maybe 70, right? But it's not going to be 85, and I like that. I think that's a good thing. But you've still got some similar sort of structural situation. We don't want to pay the asking price. Selling club has got a willing buyer. Potentially that might play it. And the player is saying, I'd like to play for Manchester United. So there seems to be some genuine rare leverage here for Ineos. Players choosing United is a very good thing. And I think a lot of United fans in the modern era would be happier with players that want to play for us, even if there was a step down a little bit in the quality, rather than us trying to convince some sort of megastar to come and play for us if we don't. And I like this. I do like this. I think this is a positive step, bringing in good characters and people that actually want to be here for the right reasons. Now, both of those deals could fall through. Tchouaméni's on a significant wage. I don't think Fernandes is, but you put 80 million or even 70 million on the table for him, that does change the picture in terms of the wages that he's going to want. Also, George Mendes being his agent, he's not going to be daft. So, if we're going to put some numbers on this, 70-ish million probably for Fernandes. I think Tchouaméni would be probably 75, maybe 80, plus a big wage package. Ederson obviously at 38.8 already done. A Fernandes and Tchouaméni double signing would mean spending north of 200 million on 3 players. And that's before you've touched left back, striker, or any squad depth. Now, there was some talk yesterday, but there wasn't a lot in it, saying that United are considering a number 9 that's going to compete with Benjamin Sesko, and Ivan Toney, Danny Welbeck's names were mentioned within that. I'm going to see if that develops on there a bit more, because I like the idea of both of those, to be honest with you. They'll do for me for a bit of a backup option, or I guess it was framed as competition for him, but they'll do me as a backup option, absolutely. But in terms of the midfielders, I think it would be one or the other. Now, what I would want to see is United probably find out what the score is with Tchouaméni first. I think Tchouaméni, a bit like Anderson, who's obviously just gone for 130 million, what the fuck, are at your tier 1. I think Fernandes is tier 2, and then I think the likes of Alex Scott and all the rest of those are like your tier 3. I mentioned this the other day, but if not, just recapping it for those who didn't see. For me, Tchouaméni is probably the best midfielder we could get outside of Anderson. I still put Anderson as first. I know he's signed for City now, but I'm not going to pretend I didn't say what I said. I said what I said, and I stand by what I said. For me, he was still the number 1, but Tchouaméni's right on that level with him, so I would not be mad at Tchouaméni. I think he is exactly what I think we need. But when I look at what Michael Carrick seems to be trying to recruit, I don't necessarily think... I think he's looking for something that's like a little bit different. But for me, Tchouaméni's the better player. He solves some real structural issues. I think he's got the experience. I think he comes in and he plays. I think that's what United need. I don't mind. I've had this conversation about 3 or 4 times with different people today, including Rio, including a couple of other people like around the pool and around the podcast today. I don't mind us going for Prem proven. And I think you've got to build your 11. You really do. You have to build a strong starting 11. Or probably starting 13 or 14 if we're being real with ourselves. I don't mind us taking risks on cheaper little players here and there, but you've got to get your 11 right, because we need the depth. We also have to sort the 11. We don't have a reliable 11 at the moment. But anyway, that's the situation. Seemingly, Tchouaméni does want United, and I know that it was quite a soft sentence said by Andy Mitten, but I still think that the fact that that truth has leaked out, I think there's something in that. And I think there's more in that than we really want to admit, because we're probably a little bit nervous of how important it could be. So for me, I think that's a real big sign. And I think there's movements at Real Madrid. I think the Valverde, Tchouaméni situation is not as resolved as people want to make it believed it to be. And I think that could be a real driving factor in him moving on. And I would be absolutely delighted to bring him in. Let me know your comments and thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.